Hello, and welcome to this discussion on understanding the ways Black fatigue diminishes the well being of Black women leaders in the government contracting industry. My name is Tammy Deane Alsberry, and this presentation is a component of my final dissertation research on the same topic. Black fatigue refers to the persistent strain caused by race related stressors such as unfair treatment, discrimination, stereotyping, and inadequate social support. In the government contracting industry, its manifestation among Black women leaders poses a challenge for organizations that rely on their presence to meet diversity requirements for contract eligibility. Understanding the factors that contribute to Black fatigue is critical, as research shows that racism, whether individual, cultural, or institutional, has significant psychological and physical consequences for people of color. Perceived discrimination alone is linked to depression, anxiety, reduced self care, and increased substance abuse among Black women. Gaining insight into these dynamics can help executive leaders reduce workplace conditions that contribute to Black fatigue and better protect the physical and psychological well being of Black women in leadership. There is no available data from the Office of Personnel Management that specifically notes the number of Black women leaders employed by government contracting organizations. However, national data reveals that Black women comprise 7.4% of the U.S. population, but only hold 4.4% of leadership positions. And of those leaders, only 1.4% are at the executive level. The notable underrepresentation of Black women in leadership is linked to a broken rung at the first step into managerial opportunities, which is due to bias, exclusion, and insufficient levels of social support. Yet, when Black women do succeed professionally and enter leadership positions, their accomplishments are often mistakenly attributed to affirmative action and chance rather than talent and competency. Therefore, the resulting stress of these factors triggers psychological and physiological issues that reduce the well being of this demographic. The government contracting industry is a multi billion-dollar sector composed of thousands of private companies that provide goods and services to government agencies. Because organizations in this industry vary widely in size, this study included Black women leaders from small businesses, mid sized firms, and large multinational contractors. Participants were Black women serving in manager, senior manager, director, and vice president roles who had advanced into mid or senior level leadership positions. They were recruited through targeted, purposeful outreach on social media. As recruitment occurred through a public invitation, the total number of individuals who viewed the posting is unknown. However, all who responded and met the inclusion criteria were interviewed, resulting in a sample of 12 Black women leaders. This approach ensured that participants had direct experience in the industry and could provide rich accounts of their leadership trajectories and workplace experiences related to Black fatigue. The conceptual framework for this study integrated self determination theory, or SDT, with intersectionality. SDT posits that human motivation is driven by three universal psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Intersectionality explains how overlapping systems of inequality, such as race, gender, class, and ethnicity, shape power dynamics and produce distinct outcomes for groups positioned at those intersections. For Black women, these intersecting identities often render their experiences marginalized or out of focus, limiting the political and organizational attention given to their specific challenges. Together, SDT and intersectionality provided a lens for examining how Black fatigue affects Black women leaders in the workplace. Accordingly, this study sought to understand how SDT motivates Black women to persist in difficult environments, the factors influencing their decisions to remain in leadership roles while experiencing Black fatigue, and how their well being is shaped by perceptions of autonomy, belonging, and competence. The purpose of the study was to explore the factors contributing to Black fatigue among Black female leaders in government contracting organizations, including how these factors have a bearing on their well being. The research questions that guided the study were: what organizational or systemic factors contribute to Black fatigue in Black women? What organizational behaviors reinforce Black female leaders' sense of belonging, competency, and autonomy in the workplace? And what factors encourage a Black woman leader to stay in a role where Black fatigue factors exist? The study used semi structured interviews to collect data. Narrative data were extracted from participant accounts and analyzed using a formative, iterative approach that honored the personal nature of their experiences. This method supported interpretation of the phenomenon from participants' insider perspectives. The interview protocol included 15 core questions with optional follow ups, all focused on participants' experiences as Black women in the government contracting industry. Interviews were scheduled for 45 to 60 minutes, though some extended longer based on participant detail. Recordings and transcripts were accessible only to the researcher, and participants were informed that no one affiliated with the University of Southern California or the OCL program would have access to the raw data. The data were analyzed through thematic coding and interpretation of interview responses. The findings from this study show that Black women's leadership experiences are shaped by the interaction of organizational culture, interpersonal dynamics, and personal resilience, underscoring the need for structures that genuinely support their well being and leadership development. Participants described Black fatigue as emerging from organizational and systemic factors across their careers and daily interactions. Being a Black woman influenced their access to leadership opportunities and required them to navigate opaque advancement structures, shifting expectations, and limited support. Conditions intensified by differing performance standards that demanded constant vigilance, overperformance, and self justification. Participants' sense of autonomy, belonging, and competence was shaped by organizational behaviors that either supported or undermined the core psychological needs outlined in self determination theory. Autonomy was essential, yet inconsistently granted, often constrained by internal politics, restrictive policies, or insufficient guidance. Inclusion varied widely, with some women experiencing strong relational support and others encountering inconsistent or absent efforts. Although their expertise was frequently relied upon, it was also subject to racialized and gendered misinterpretations that created emotional and cognitive strain. Despite these challenges, Black women leaders persisted through a set of interrelated practices that helped them navigate structural barriers and emotional demands. They leveraged strategic relationships, pursued personal and professional development, and sought external validation to counter limited organizational support. Robust support systems, including mentors, coaches, networks, family, and friends, provided grounding when workplace resources were lacking. Participants also emphasized leading by example and sustaining themselves through self care, therapy, faith, and community. This study began before the start of Donald Trump's second presidency. However, all interviews were conducted after his administration commenced. During this period, widely reported federal actions signaled increased scrutiny of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and heightened attention toward senior level minority officials. Scholars have also noted a broader socio-political climate in which terms historically used to describe the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color have been reframed in ways that support exclusionary narratives. Participants' reflections captured the added stress of working in the government contracting industry amid these shifts. Accordingly, the recommendations offered in this study were refined to align with organizational practices that remain permissible under current executive orders and evolving interpretations of employment law. Organizations must critically examine how white normative standards of professionalism shape evaluations, promotions, and daily interactions. To reduce inequities, competency models should be revised to reflect cultural diversity in leadership, and evaluators must be trained to recognize and interpret racialized and gendered bias while operating within clear accountability structures. Leadership development should also integrate intersectionality, racial equity, and gender bias to help leaders understand how perceptions of expertise, confidence, and assertiveness are shaped by bias. Such training equips leaders to create psychologically safe environments where authenticity, feedback, and disagreement are not penalized, and where biased behaviors and microaggressions are addressed promptly and transparently. Inclusion efforts must move beyond symbolic gestures. Organizations should conduct regular equity audits, establish transparent accountability mechanisms, and allocate meaningful resources to support marginalized employees. Clarifying promotion criteria, ensuring equitable access to stretch assignments, and monitoring advancement and retention data for racial and gender disparities are essential components of this work. Finally, an integrated learning plan with targeted training modules for executives, managers, HR professionals, and employees can support consistent implementation of these recommendations.